Picture this. You've wanted to start a YouTube channel or a podcast or a business for years. You've done all the research. You know the steps you need to take. All that's left to do is do it. So you open your laptop, grab your notes, warm up your typing fingers, and you close your laptop and walk away because it's not the right moment. You're not ready yet. You don't have one little aspect of it 100% figured out. Does that sound familiar to you? You ever get that feeling that you're not quite where you need to be before you start something? You just keep pushing it further and further down the road until you get trapped in this mindset of needing to be absolutely 100% fully prepared. Tough love time, that's never gonna happen. This feeling of not being ready to jump into a project, whatever it may be, is really common. We've all been there. But what a lot of people don't realize is that nobody has it all figured out. We're all just making it up as we go along. It is so much better to just get started now than it is to keep refining your plan until the project becomes thinking about the project, not actually doing it. Let me tell you a story. About a decade ago, I was working retail selling cameras. All things considered, not the worst job in the world, but it's not what I wanted to do. The pay was bad, management was always trying to get us to upsell, and most of the time, the customers didn't treat us like human beings. That got old pretty quick. I had been there about 2 years when a friend of mine told me that he'd found some success with his YouTube channel. I thought to myself, I'm a better editor than he is, so maybe I should give it a shot. So over the next few weeks, I brainstormed what I could make my channel about. Did a little research about what was popular, thought about what I could feasibly do, how long it would take me to make a video, stuff like that. Pretty quickly, I settled on my plan. Make a simple YouTube channel with a whiteboard and stick figures, talk about stuff people don't usually think twice about, and call it Second Thought. Now, I had two main problems working against me. First, I was a perfectionist. I hated putting out projects that I wasn't proud of. And second, I was kinda lazy, which didn't really jibe with the perfectionism thing. Regardless, I was able to overcome both of these challenges through the power of my hatred of retail. I figured I could start the channel, not spend too much time on it because I was working a full-time job already, and if it picked up, I could dedicate more time and energy to it. So that was that. I went home from work one day and started figuring out how to set up a camera over the whiteboard and light the thing properly. Once I had that done, I figured I needed a logo, so I drew it on the whiteboard with red and black markers. Was it pretty? No. Did it do the job? Yes. I could have spent more time getting any of these steps perfect, but it would have completely derailed me and squandered the precious momentum I had gathered the last few weeks. That's one of the key takeaways from my experience. Starting a YouTube channel is a big undertaking, and if you try to think about it as a single monster task, it's too much. You just get paralyzed thinking about how much you need to do. But if you break it up into little chunks, how do I set up the whiteboard? Where does the light need to be? What color should I make my logo? It becomes much easier. Yeah, now you've got a bunch of little tasks, but you can check them off one by one, and none of them take all that much time or effort. And more than that, with every item you check off the list, you're building that critical momentum and overcoming the inertia of inaction. That's the hardest part of the whole process. Just convincing yourself to take that first step. That momentum you pick up along the way will propel you forward through your more challenging tasks. Assembling your first video, designing a compelling thumbnail, doing the legwork to advertise your channel. Each of these steps is critical, and because you've had all that practice with the little tasks, the bigger ones seem less daunting. We've all heard the expression, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. It's a little cheesy, but it's true. You have a goal in mind. There are a whole bunch of steps along the way, but it is 100% guaranteed you won't make it to your goal if you don't take that first step, however tiny it may seem at the time. When you look back a year later, you'll see that all those tiny steps have carried you further than you could have expected, and certainly further than if you were still fretting about the minute details of your project. I'm sure some of you are wondering, okay, but how do I force myself to take that first step? That's fair. A lot of times it can seem scary to just jump in and start a new project. What worked for me back when I was starting out, and still works for me today, is thinking, who cares? What's the worst that could happen? You waste a little time and effort trying something new? Doing something creative? That's not wasted time more than going to the gym is wasted time because no one saw you with your shirt off that afternoon. It's good for you to try new things. It's good to exercise your mind. It can help build self-confidence. And if things go well, you just started a project that could completely change your life, as it did for me. Another thing people often ask me is, how do you know when you know enough? This applies mostly to more academic projects. A podcast about history or art. A YouTube channel about politics. And the answer to that is the same as almost anything in life. You'll never truly feel like you know enough. The more you learn, especially about something like political theory, the more you realize that there's so much you don't know. And that can be paralyzing. What's the threshold for knowing enough to speak authoritatively on a subject? Well, that's for you to decide, and it varies by discipline. The social sciences probably have a lower barrier to entry than, say, neuroscience. But in general, there's nothing wrong with learning as you go. In fact, that can be a really helpful way to build an audience. If you take Second Thought, for example, I hadn't read much theory when I made the switch to political content. I didn't go to school for this stuff, I wasn't an expert or even particularly well versed in some of the things I talked about. And sometimes that left me with videos that I look at today and go, not great. But guess what? A lot of the audience is at the same level at the time you released the video. I've got viewers still watching today who had the same political journey I had and followed along with me on the channel. That's kinda cool. That's not to say you should go in completely blind. You at least need to know how to research and synthesize data to make it accessible, but you don't have to be a leading scholar in whatever field you're talking about. YouTube isn't a scientific journal. In 2 clicks, you can be watching the most deranged Zoomer memes you've ever seen. Don't take yourself too seriously, and don't worry that you don't know enough. You never will. The only people who can be said to know enough about a subject are the people who dedicate their lives to it. And I bet you anything they'll still say there's so much for them to learn. What's been helpful to me is the fact that in order to keep making my videos, I have to keep learning. Whether I want to or not, I'm becoming more well-versed in the things I talk about. I'm reading more, watching more, consuming news more thoughtfully. Analyses that would have baffled me 4 years ago are common sense to me now. I can dredge up a relevant historical quote, or reference a piece of theory, or keep up with an intense political dialogue way more easily than I would have expected. That's just how experience works. You pick up more knowledge as you go, regardless of what field you're working in. So don't let your lack of expertise hold you back. For now, enthusiasm and a willingness to learn is good enough. And honestly, that's all there really is to it. None of us have everything figured out. We never feel like we're ready. Whether it's to start a new job, or launch a podcast, or go out on stage, there's always more we could do to prepare. But we don't need to. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Know that each person you watch on YouTube, myself very much included, is just kind of winging it. We may have picked up some tips and tricks along the way that make it seem like we've got it all figured out, but we're really just making slightly more educated guesses. There are plenty of people on this platform who take what they do a little too seriously or feel like they're more important than they are. And those people and the authority they wield can make them seem a little intimidating, but they're just normal people too. Remember that at one point, they had to hype themselves up to take that first tiny step, and then the next one, and then the next one, until they got to where they are today. Let go of that perfectionism, embrace the knowledge that you'll never know enough, and just go for it. Taking action, even when you don't feel ready, is the only way to make progress. So take a minute when you're done here and think about what it is that's making you put off starting your project. Is it a legitimate reason? Or are you just fooling yourself into thinking you're not ready yet? You never will be. No one ever is. You just gotta do it anyway.